Hoekstra, one of the problems here is the fact that the president came into office with a diplomatic strategy, what some people call the grand bargain, the idea that he would take regime change off the table in the hopes that Iran would then agree to change its behavior on terrorism, on nuclear weapons. How much is that diplomatic strategy dead because of the events that we've seen over the course of the last week? If the Ayatollah Khamenei and President Ahmadinejad prevail, should the U.S. continue, can the U.S. continue to try to engage them diplomatically?
Well, what the president is doing, I think he's stubbornly holding on to this belief that negotiations with the current regime is the best way forward. I really think, and I do agree with Senator Bai here, that a combination of speaking out forcefully and at the same time maybe moving forward with sanctions will bring about the kind of change and will let us take advantage, or will let the Iranian people, this is about the Iranian people, let the Iranian people take advantage of this opportunity that is in front of them. As to whether speaking out forcefully undercuts the voices of freedom and the voices of protest in Iran, I don't buy that for a minute. Us speaking out forcefully on their behalf, the regime is going to accuse us of meddling whether we do or whether we do not say anything. But if we're going to do something, we should speak out.
Now, let's look backwards a little bit. President Obama came under heavy criticism all this week for his cautious statements, and I want to play a clip of perhaps his most controversial statement. Here it is.
The difference between Ahmadinejad and Mousavi in terms of their actual policies may not be as great as has been advertised.
Mr. Sajapur, first of all, is that true? The president went on to say, either way, we're going to be dealing with a regime that's hostile to the U.S. Do you believe that there is no great difference between what we would face with Mousavi as compared to what we have and would continue to face with Ahmadinejad? And how dispiriting was that statement to the protesters in the street?
Well, Chris, I do believe that was a misstep by the president, and I think the White House acknowledges now in retrospect that was a misstep, and if you've noticed, the rhetoric has changed. But I didn't get the impression that this had made a tremendous impact on the demonstrations in Tehran and elsewhere throughout the country.
But going back to the original question, would there be a difference, Mousavi versus Ahmadinejad?
Absolutely, and what we have to recognize is this movement is much bigger than Mir Hossein Mousavi. This is not about Mir Hossein Mousavi anymore. This is about the political and social and economic discontents which have been brewing in Iran for 3 decades now.
Let's look at how the statements of President Obama and Secretary of State Clinton have evolved this week. Here's a series of clips.
It's not productive, given the history of U.S.-Iranian relations, to be seen as meddling.
Our intent is to pursue whatever opportunities might exist in the future with Iran to discuss these matters.
The government of Iran recognizes that the world is watching.
Mr. Sajapur, several questions. First of all, and this speaks to something that Senator Bai and Congressman Hoekstra were discussing, what about this argument that if the president speaks out, it somehow empowers and gives more ammunition to the Iranian regime to say that these protesters are just puppets of the United States?
Chris, that is a big concern I have as well, and that's why I think the president's rhetoric so far has been well calibrated. And the historical analogy which concerns me, Chris, is Iraq in 1991, when George Bush Sr. encouraged Iraqis to rise up. Saddam slaughtered them, and then the rest of the world didn't criticize Saddam for the slaughter, but they criticized George Bush for encouraging Iraqis to speak out. So I think this regime is looking for the United States to step into this trap so they have the license to slaughter the Iranian people and accuse them of being American lackeys.
But they're already saying this. In fact, you had President Ahmadinejad today say to the U.S. and Britain, stop interfering. So whether we do it or not, they're going to accuse us of doing it.
Chris, I really defer to the leaders of these opposition movements themselves in Iran, the opposition leaders in Iran, and I've not heard from any of them who say that the United States should become directly involved. They've all said that the United States should continue to denounce human rights abuses, and our plight should continue to be broadcast throughout the world, but none of them have asked the United States to play a more active defiant role in domestic internal Iranian politics.
Let me try to wrap this up with all of you gentlemen, and Senator Bai, let me start with you. Where are we headed? I mean, I know it's almost impossible, but your best guess, and also obviously the intelligence you're getting, where are we headed? Will the regime be able to silence the opposition? Will it grow? And if the regime is able to hold on to power, will they become even more radical or more moderate?
My best guess, Chris, and this situation is evolving, so quickly, is that we're looking at a process of evolutionary change that's going to take some time. I mean, we all hope that it will be sooner rather than later, and that we'll get a legitimate democracy that wants to engage with the rest of the world tomorrow. But the forces of the regime, the military, the secret police, the gangs that they employ on the street are such that they're just not going to go away overnight. But they're starting, as Kareem mentioned, to lose their legitimacy among the Iranian people. And so if we stand in solidarity with the Iranian people, don't meddle. They're going to accuse us of that no matter what, but give them no credible evidence they can point to so the Iranian people and the rest of the world know that we're handling this the right way. Then I think over time, those fissures will continue to grow within their government, and in the fullness of time, we'll see a more legitimate Iranian regime. But as much as I wish I could say that's going to happen tomorrow, I think this is a process that is going to take some time to unfold. They'll try and crack down, regrettably. This is bad for the Iranian people, but it's also bad for the regime because they're losing their legitimacy both at home and abroad through these repressive, brutal tactics.
Congressman Hoekstra, we have less than a minute left. Why don't you share that with Mr. Sajapur, your thoughts about where we're headed?
Excuse me, Chris. I think we are moving forward. We need to stand with the people. We need to recognize that we need to focus on what our strategy is going to be in the future. This is a regime that's going to have nuclear weapons soon. They are going to continue to be a brutal and a repressive regime. We need to now start getting the international community prepared to deal with that reality and to deal with it much more effectively than what we've done over the last 8 to 10 years to try to stop them from getting nuclear weapons.
And Mr. Sajapur.
I wanted to just echo Senator Bay's comments. I thought they were spot on, and I am hopeful. It's a moment of tremendous fear and tremendous hope, but I am hopeful that the will of the vast majority of the Iranian people will eventually be realized.
Gentlemen, we want to thank you all so much for coming in today to discuss the latest developments there, and we will stay on top of the story. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Up next, we continue our